watching a Screaming Fish here, people. Once again, I'm here for you guys with yet another video, and this time, as you can tell by the clearly very obvious title under the screen, we are looking at Solo, a Star Wars story, the least anticipated Star Wars movie since, well, ever, apparently. I mean, me, personally, I was excited for Solo, a Star Wars story, because, I mean, it's Star Wars, literally, like, if anything Star Wars comes out, I'm automatically excited for it, but, yeah, to get straight to the point, I wasn't completely excited for this movie. I was sort of like, kinda to not really, because, I mean, I don't really think a Han Solo origin movie is really all that necessary, but, oh well, we got one and here we are. So without further ado, let's go and review Solo, a Star Wars story. By the way, he shot first. I'm telling you, he really did shoot first. And that was a really bad joke. I went into this movie with low expectations, but I didn't go into it wanting to hate it either. Because going to see a movie that you want to hate, well, that's just dumb. Anyway, Han Solo is one of my favourite Star Wars characters of all time, but making a movie about him just seemed kind of unnecessary. I don't need to see a whole film about his origin story just to like the character even more than I already do. I am aware of all the problems this movie went through behind the scenes, and I'm not going to talk about that at all in this video because it's been talked about enough already, and I don't want to drag this video on for too long anyway. I know. This review is coming out pretty late, but I wanted to take some time to properly let it sink in. A lot of things were going through my mind, and I thought it would be really stupid of me to make a review of the film when I hadn't properly processed it. So let's talk about Alden Ehrenreich as Han Solo. I was really confused by this casting choice when I first heard about it, but I'm not gonna lie, he was actually pretty good in this movie. A lot of people have complained that he looks nothing like Harrison Ford and doesn't even sound like him. But the thing is, looks aren't the most important thing here. It's not about whether or not he looks like Harrison Ford or even sounds like him. It's about whether or not he can recapture the attitude of Han Solo, and Alden Ehrenreich did that wonderfully. He was one of the best parts of this whole movie, which is something I wasn't expecting to say walking out. The best thing about his performance is that he's not trying to do an imitation of Harrison Ford. He's making the character his own while still capturing all the characteristics that make Han Solo who he is. Ehrenreich was basically breathing the charismatic charm of Han Solo. He pretty much disappeared into the character. I can say that I actually loved this interpretation of the character. I could never have predicted that Alden Ehrenreich would recapture what Ford brought to the role as well as he did. His interactions with the other cast members were utterly delightful. Han's witty and snarky attitude brought a lot of humour to the dialogue as well as his sarcasm. I love the scenes where Han messes up, and that's great because we get to see a young Han Solo who's trying to learn from his mistakes and survive. He has to learn from his mistakes in order to make a name for himself, and while it did make for some pretty good comedy, it also made Han more relatable. One of the best things about this movie for me was the dynamic between Han and Chewbacca. I love the way the two characters actually meet in the film, and their interactions in this film really brought their relationship to life in a brilliant way, and because of this, the interactions between the two characters in the other movies have more depth. Chewbacca in general is great in this movie. It was cool to see him in a more important role this time around, and he's actually one of the most interesting characters in the film. They gave him a lot more character development than I thought they would, and his motivations gave him the greatest sense of purpose he's ever had in these films. Donald Glover was perfect as Lando. Whoever it was that suggested that Donald Glover should play Lando is a freaking genius. He was so smooth and so full of himself that he became one of the most likable characters in the whole film. I would say that he is just as, if not better than Billy D. Williams. He was that good in this role. He was everything I was hoping he would be. As for the new characters, well, they were kind of hit or miss for me. First off, Woody Harrelson as Tobias Beckett. He was fine. I really wouldn't call this Woody Harrelson's best performance. There is a sort of mentor-student relationship that is present a couple of times in the movie between Beckett and Han. The problem is they just don't do a lot with it. I wish there were more scenes of Beckett actually teaching Han some of the things he knows about being a criminal in this universe. It would have given their relationship more depth and meaning. His character is so basic that it feels like anyone can play him. You could even cast someone like Carl Urban or Chris Pine in the role and the character would be no different. However, I did really like Emilia Clarke in this movie. She was a badass and a really interesting character. Her relationship with Han is one of the strongest aspects of the film, and her chemistry with Ehrenreich was fantastic. She was exceptional in a lot of the action sequences, and her performance was really strong throughout. I did think Thandie Newton was good, but she was incredibly underutilized. Thandie Newton is a phenomenal actor, and she is just wasted in this film. The same could be said for Jon Favreau's character Rio. He got almost nothing in this movie, so much so that at points I actually forgot he was even in it. Paul Bettany was pretty good as a villain. He was pretty intimidating and suitably over the top, but as a character he wasn't that interesting. I never felt like I could get behind him because I was given no reason to really care about the guy. He's more or less used as a plot device to forward the plot, and that's all you really get from him. Phoebe Waller-Bridge was awesome as L3. She is pretty much the comic relief of this film, but her character also had quite a bit of depth and personality. A lot of her jokes really hit, and I particularly enjoyed her interactions with Lando. I found myself being consistently entertained by the movie. I like that it's a heist film set in the Star Wars universe. It's interesting to see a Star Wars movie on a smaller scale, and the small scale really works in the film's favour. We get to learn new things about this universe, particularly the criminal underworld, which is one of the most fascinating aspects of this film. The film can feel like a checklist at times, though. Like there's a guy behind the scenes going, "Han meets Chewie, check. Han meets Lando, double check." But while it can make the film feel pretty predictable, the way the scenes we all expected to see in the film play out in really fun and interesting ways. There is some great humour in Solo, as expected, though I was 70-30 on the comedy overall. There wasn't really anything that had me laughing out loud. The best it really got out of me was something along the lines of The first 20 minutes are pretty clunky in execution. It jumped rapidly from plot point to plot point so quickly that it was hard to really grasp what was going on, but that wasn't enough to stop me from having a really fun time with this movie. Because I did have a fun time watching Solo. Despite the problems I have with the movie, I was never bored. The action sequences are a blast. They're not the absolute best Star Wars has to offer, but they are still entertaining and have some pretty great moments. The effects, to no surprise, were beautiful, and the same could be said for all the creature designs and practical effects. The best aspect of the action for me was the realism. The characters don't have lightsabers, and none of them can use the Force to get themselves out of certain situations. So that did up the stakes considerably, and it made the action more thrilling as a result, because compared to a Jedi Knight, the characters in Solo are just more likely to get hurt because they're just normal people. The score for Solo is one of the best scores for a Star Wars movie, period. John Powell did a fantastic job with the music. I would easily put the score for this movie in my top 5 favourite Star Wars movie scores. The music brought a welcome sense of levity and joy, but when it needed to, it also really upped the tension in a lot of the action sequences. My biggest complaint with Solo is that it sets itself up for a potential sequel, and honestly, I think that's the worst thing they could have done. Don't get me wrong, I would love to see Alden Ehrenreich return as his character, but I just don't see the point in having set up for a sequel when you don't even know if there's going to be one. And as a result of this, a few really important plot threads in the movie feel unresolved and incomplete. And if the sequel never happens, then that feeling of incompletion is going to be even more present. The film also doesn't really explain how Han became who he was in the original Star Wars trilogy. In the original trilogy, Han is a pretty grumpy dude and is very easily annoyed by people when they don't do things the way he would do it. But the film doesn't really provide an explanation as to how he got there. Why is he like that? We still don't know. That isn't a negative on the portrayal of Han Solo, but more of a negative on the storytelling. I know that issue with the film is possibly a result of the film trying to set itself up for a sequel, but it seems like the writers were afraid that having that characteristic would make Han too unlikable, but for me anyway, that's one of the best qualities of Han Solo from the original Star Wars trilogy. Say what you will about The Last Jedi, but that movie actually took risks, even if a few of those risks didn't really pay off. Solo, for a large majority of its runtime, plays it pretty safe. So safe that an accurate description of the film would be Han and Chewie going on a bunch of adventures. But with that said, I had a pretty good time with those adventures. There is, however, one scene in this movie that took me completely by surprise. I wasn't expecting anything like it to happen, and it blew my mind. Easily one of the best scenes in the whole movie. Solo: A Star Wars Story is by no means a flawless movie, but it's nowhere near bad. I enjoyed myself a lot more than I thought I was going to. I would even say that I enjoyed this film more than I did Rogue One. Yes, Rogue One does have a spectacular third act, but the 2 acts preceding it, while still fine, are pretty hard to get through. Solo, on the other hand, had me consistently entertained despite its flaws. So if someone asked me which Star Wars story I would like to rewatch, I would most likely pick Solo. So with that in mind, Solo: A Star Wars Story gets a 7 out of 10. So guys, those are my thoughts on Solo: A Star Wars Story. I do hope you enjoyed this video. I like the film we got. I think it's a very entertaining heist movie that I think a lot of people, if they set their expectations low, will really enjoy. I still don't think it's really necessary to have a Han Solo origin movie, but hey, the movie we got, it's pretty good. But yeah, what did you think of Solo: A Star Wars Story? Did you think it was good? Did you think it was bad? Did you think it was so in the middle? Please leave your thoughts down in the comments below. And I will indeed see you guys in the next one. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, obviously. Unfortunately, I'm not on Stardust anymore because it's not available in the UK, so I can't even access my account. But everything else, like my Twitter, is still there, so just go follow me on there. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.